Welcome to the Mind Chimp Podcast.
Okay, welcome to the Mind Chimp Podcast. How are we doing?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me on.
No, the pleasure's all mine. It's a long time coming, right?
We have been talking about it for about 6 months, I think.
Yeah, I reckon so. Maybe a touch longer. But anyway, we digress already. So, first thing I need you to do for me, Kate, is I need you to tell me 5 numbers, if you can, please, from 1 to 100.
Oh, this is exciting. 7, yep. 23, 42, 61, 95.
Awesome. We will come back to them a little bit later on down the line. So, with all my guests, Kate, the first thing I do is ask them to give me a bit of a log line. Can you remember what yours is?
It's something I really enjoy about your podcast. And when I listen to them, I always think, oh, what would I say? So actually coming on here, I had to think about it. So I came up with, I am a collector and connector of people and stories.
A collector and connector of people and stories?
I think I just woke my Alexa up then.
Smart homes.
Yes, that's what I came up with.
Okay, so explain that to me then.
So I think my role, I think you said that we might get into some of like my career and journey and things. I guess it isn't very straightforward or very black and white. And also, I don't know that I just wanted to define myself in my log line by my job.
Okay.
So I tried to think about what I'm like in my personal life as well. I mean, Gemma Patterson, nee Critchley, talks about, work being more like normal life. And I think that, yes, I think that work, what I do for a living, has always kind of bled into my personal who I am. So, but I don't necessarily just want to define myself by my job.
Okay, so let's just take the connector out of the way for a second.
Yeah.
So collector, how, in what way?
I think that I really like people.
Okay.
And I once did one of these personality profiling, quizzes, tests at work. And it was one of these, it was a while ago when I worked for a vendor. And it was one of these, how does the dynamic of the team fit together and how do all the different personalities work together? And they had never seen anybody with such a high score for being sociable. I was literally off the chart, and that might not surprise anybody that knows me. But I like to collect people as I go through life. And I used to have a teacher when I was at school that used to say, if you can count 5 true friends, then in your life, then you're really lucky. And I have got more than that without wanting to, humble brag it or whatever. But I like to, I collected you, for example, like you're in now, you're in my collection. That's it. So I like people to be interesting. I like people who challenge me. I like people who support me. I think that, especially probably working from home and working remotely, I think that's even more important probably latterly in my life, because otherwise I could sit here all day and maybe not talk to people. And that would be something that I would struggle with quite a lot.
So obviously I know you know me, but why do you think you are so social? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's just in your personality, or it's not really. I think, obviously a lot of these Myers-Briggs things have been debunked over time, but yeah. I think that, if you're introverted, you're introverted. If you're extroverted, you're extroverted. It's not to say that you can't be one or the other. And I think I've got a friend who describes herself as something like the most extroverted introvert that she knows, or something like that. But I don't know. I think it's just always been my personality. I think I've always liked, ever since I was a kid, and now I'm a mum. I've got 2 kids, and they both absolutely love being with their friends. And just over the Christmas holidays, had to make sure that we had sort of meetups and play dates scheduled in, because they're desperate to kind of hang out with their mates, and they're only 2 and 6.
Oh wow.
So I think it's just, probably just in my personality.
So have you always been like that? Is that something kind of where you've come into, or have you kind of been like that throughout, school and stuff? Or
I think so. Yeah. I was talking to somebody earlier about school, and I was saying, I always feel really sorry for people who had a bad time at school, and that's a common thing that you hear. But we were talking about it, and I just had all I remember from school is having fun.
all right,
I'm sure they
okay.
were boring lessons, and I'm sure, there were some physics lessons that weren't all that exciting. But yeah, all I remember is having a good time and laughing. And yeah, even the learning was fun, wasn't just messing about. I was quite good at school. But yeah, I think that's always just been there.
All right, cool. So I mean, while we're in school, I guess obviously, when you had the teacher come up to you and go, Kate, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you say to the teacher?
Well, I ruled out being a digger driver. That was my first ambition, as my mum always likes to tell people. And then I wanted to be a professional footballer. But when those two fell by the wayside, I wanted to be a journalist.
All right, okay.
So, and then again, one of these sort of test things that you do when you're doing your GCSEs or whatever, um, it came out that journalist was high up the list, but marketing came out as a possibility as well. So then, and marketing and advertising, I think it was at the time, show my age maybe. And then when it came to looking for university courses, when I was in sixth form, that I don't know if I should say this, but I got a lot of advice about trying to get into English courses, which is what you needed to do journalism. There wasn't really like journalism courses, it was kind of English and then on at that time. And everyone said, oh, you need kind of three A's to get in. And I was thinking, oh, I'm not going to get three A's, And so I started looking at some of the marketing and advertising courses as maybe a slightly more realistic option. I mean, actually, I did right in my A levels. I didn't get three A's, but yeah, and that's how I got into what I do now, because I went to Aston and did a marketing degree.
So I guess, yeah, I mean, from a digger driver to being into marketing, that's quite a leap. Where did the digger driver come from?
It's a segue. I was tiny, but I was quite a tomboy when I was little. So diggers, footballs, yeah, that was, and all my sort of best friends when I was younger were all lads. So I wanted to be George from the Famous Five.
Who doesn't?
So yeah, but like I suppose the journalist thing comes back to the stories thing as well. So I do like understanding people's stories. I love reading like silly lists of things that people will put on Facebook about themselves, answering random questions. I love to understand those. And some of the reason why I like your podcast so much is because, yeah, I'm nosy basically. And you get some really interesting details out of people. So I think that's always been something that I've had all the way through life. And I think that's something that in my current role, I spend a lot of time understanding stories about what organizations are doing or what people are doing. And I love that element of what I do.
So I guess, obviously me and probably a large percentage of our industry know exactly who you are, but there's probably some people who don't. So kind of with a smooth segue from the marketing, maybe you could give us a bit of a whistle stop tour of kind of, yeah, like in your professional career, kind of where you've come from to kind of where you are right now, I guess.
So I went to university to do marketing and really enjoyed it. I did a year in industry. It was a compulsory part of my degree. And I did a year working for Waitrose, part of the John Lewis partnership. And they offered me a job after graduation. It was really good. I laugh now looking back. It was really good money at the time. I didn't really have a concept of what a good wage was, but I turned it down and went traveling instead, as per so many people do. And then I came back, and my now husband, wasn't my husband at the time, he was in the RAF, so he got posted to a different place, which was Wiltshire. And so I started looking for jobs nearby and wanted a marketing job because that was my degree, and went to work for a company called QA, who a lot of people in the industry will know as a huge provider of traditionally IT training. But they've diversified obviously a lot over the years. They're still an absolutely huge company now, one of the biggest really, and they do all sorts of project management. They do a lot of digital stuff now as well. And so that was how I got into this wonderful world of training / learning and development. So I started off life there, and then I went to work for what is now Calidus from there, and that's really how I got into the learning technology side of things. And I did 3.5 years there, and that was where I suppose things started to open up really. I met a lot of people doing that role. I worked with some really great managers and colleagues, and everyone was very generous, I think, in terms of sort of networking and introducing me to people. I mean, we're prepping for learning technologies now as we sit here, learning technologies 2020, and I think this is my 16th year.
Wow.
So it's pulling a face, consecutive year of learning technologies, which is terrifying really, because QA used to exhibit there back in the day as well. So that was one of my very first ever experiences of a trade show in a professional role. But I got introduced to lots of people, and Twitter took off while I was there. That's when Twitter started. And that was when I started my Twitter account, and I left with, I think I had something like 800 followers, and I don't know why I remember that, but I remember having sort of conversations with people like Jay Cross on Twitter, and it was just quite democratizing at the time. I think that's kind of a bit of an overused word, but I was just a marketing girl at a vendor. I didn't necessarily have any business having conversations with these people, but because the barriers had come down and the access was there, and I was interested, I suppose, passionate about what I did, then I was able to sort of start to expand my network and all of that kind of stuff. Then I had a bit of an ill-fated stint with a different company. And then from there, I left to start up my own marketing business, and another startup on the side. And I did that for 4 years. And that's where a lot of people know me from, I suppose, is that period of time. And I worked with some great clients. So my existing employer, Fosway, was a client. Kineo, for example, Sabre I worked with. So I had some really fantastic clients and experiences while I was there. And then we relocated back to Wales. And so I decided to bow out of the business and went to work for David Wilson at Fosway Group. And I have been there for 4 years, scarily enough.
Right, okay. So I mean, obviously there's a lot to cover there. So you mentioned the startup, and you mentioned kind of Fosway and learning tech. So I guess I want to kind of touch upon that startup a little bit. So I'm assuming, most people have ideas, right? And a lot of them don't follow them through. Startups tend to be a love child of whatever. So if you was to give a bit of advice on that whole startup thing, what's been like your biggest learning from that period?
I mean, I learned a huge amount from that period. I had the business for 4 years, and it was, I can't tell you. I mean, I had, a kind of thriving marketing business, a sort of tech startup, and I had a baby. And I wouldn't advise to anybody to do all of those at the same time, if I'm brutally honest. So maybe that's learning point number one. I think anything that demands your attention like that and deserves your attention, it's very hard to split your attention. So, as I mentioned, I was working with some fantastic clients on the marketing side of the business when I had Ascot. And I never wanted to let them down. So I never was able to really give the startup the time and attention that it warranted. And I'd say to anybody, who wants to get a business up and running, and so many people sort of bootstrap things on the side now, just don't split your attention in too many ways. Because if you have got to pay the bills and you have got a day job and there are people depending on you, clients or colleagues or whatever, then you're always going to have to service them first. So if you've got a passion project, and I'm still, I still have passion projects, which, we might get into a bit later, but I have learned to say no. And I am much better at ring fencing time and giving things the attention that they deserve. And I think that was probably my biggest lesson. I would also say there's a lot of guff out there about, oh, follow your passion, do something you're passionate about, and all of that sort of stuff. And I don't necessarily think that that's true when it comes to something like a startup. I don't necessarily think it has to be, oh, I love makeup, therefore, it has to be something to do in the makeup arena. I don't necessarily think that that is true. And sometimes when you work so hard on something and are so close to something, it can kill it a little bit for you. So actually keeping your passions as passions and keeping something that you want to build up for work as work, that ring fencing can be more beneficial, I think.
I think it's an interesting one. I kind of agree to a point. So, I mean, I kind of see it similar to like having 2 or 3 careers running at the side of each other. I think we should, like, for instance, my career, let's just call it real general terms, in learning. My other career, which I do a lot more now, is in design. Mm-hmm. And actually, what does that look like? And then the third one is obviously a startup, which people will find out over time. But I think it comes down to fixing a problem, right? Like, the makeup is a passion, yeah, and it's cool. But actually, what problem does that really fix for anyone? If it doesn't, then kind of what's the point? Like I say, enjoy just putting makeup on or doing whatever. I don't know. I don't wear makeup, so
yeah. I mean, it was. Yeah. I mean, I grasped at that randomly, but it's. I think there's something about the kind of the hours and the demands of a startup that can quite easily kill your passion for something quite quickly. So I think sometimes it's better to be a bit dispassionate about it and be able to just kind of coldly almost focus on it and not get too emotionally involved. I would also say sometimes having personal relationships with friendships with people that you go into business with, not always the best way to do things because they don't necessarily come out intact. So I would always caution people. It's very easy to kind of get involved with people that you're great mates with. And I it's not just my own personal experience. Now I'm a little bit older. I've got several friends that have been through kind of similar things. And again, sometimes it's easier to be less emotionally involved or less emotionally attached and have a kind of almost like a cold business relationship rather than a personal friendship or whatever. So
okay. So you mentioned you went travelling. Walk me through that. Tell me a bit about that.
It was the classic thing of you get through your finals and I was like, I never want to have anything to do with marketing ever again. Ever. So I just did a little bit of traveling around Europe and then went to live in Cyprus. and because my husband, now boyfriend then, got posted out there, and it was, golden opportunity. So his dad did 22 years in the RAF and never got anywhere near Cyprus. So we were like 22. I was working in a Welsh pub, if you can believe it, a Welsh themed pub. So a Cypriot guy who married a girl from Caerphilly, and then instead of opening an Irish pub when he went back, opened a Welsh pub. So I was working in there a few nights a week, and we just lived the dream. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And there was loads of expats, loads of locals, and we had friends ranging from kind of our age right up to kind of Brian in his mid 70s who'd retired out there. And we'd just sit at the bar with him, watch football. Absolutely brilliant. So yeah, so classic sort of route through Europe, and then landed up on a Limassol beach basically.
Oh, nice. Is there any place where you're not in no rush to go back to?
I got fleeced in Marrakesh.
Right.
But I would go. But I would go back. I wouldn't go back to Cairo.
Okay.
I feel like I saw what I needed to. I saw what I needed to see. The Sphinx is disappointingly small. We went inside a pyramid, which was freaking amazing. But like when you see that there's a KFC directly opposite the pyramid, it just killed it a bit. And we did the museum, and then we got out. And my dad spent like many, many years in the Middle East, and he just said, he said Cairo. He said, get in, go to the museum, go to the pyramids, get out. So I wouldn't probably be in a rush to go back to. It's very, very like polluted,
right?
And
okay,
smoggy and busy. It's it's not to say don't go there, but I wouldn't necessarily rush back.
It's not what it used to be. Is that?
Well, no. Certainly Cleopatra is probably turning in a grave. Yeah.
So, how did you get fleeced in Marrakesh? What happened there?
Oh, it's just classic going into the souks on like the first day, and then again, you see, I like people. I like to chat. Anybody that knows me will know that I like to chat. People can never, but until they meet her, people can never believe that my sister talks more than me. And just got into conversation with somebody, ended up buying something, and then like sort of first day you're not familiar with the money, and then you get out and you're like, oh, what, I've just paid like 60 quid for something that's worth 27 pence. So they saw me coming.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like, oh, whoa, she's not from around here.
And that's the thing, I mean, I'm pale, I'm redhead. I mean, I just they just know. When I lived in Cyprus, I tried to learn a bit of Greek, and I obviously, having been an English, colony or part of the Commonwealth or whatever, Cyprus, everyone speaks really amazing English. You don't need to be able to speak Greek to get by there at all. But I was like, no, I'm living here. I'm gonna try and learn the language. And I'd go into a shop or whatever and try and speak a bit of Greek, and they just laugh at me and speak to me in English. They could just tell, just by looking at me. So my Greek didn't get very far, to be fair.
So I guess so you come back home, kind of settle down, I guess, if that's the right term. So I guess this kind of leads me on to the next question in here. So what's been your biggest personal success, and you can't say your children or marriage?
I'd say I was going to say my kids. My biggest personal success. It probably is the people that I've connected. As I say, collected. Makes me sound a bit creepy, but my friendships. I work really hard at my friendships. The girls that I go on holiday with every year are the girls I worked with in my first job at QA. So that is 16, 17 years into friendships. We're all scattered around, we're all really busy, but we all still meet up, we all still go on an annual holiday together. I've got really good friends from university, I've got really good friends from school. I've made some lovely friends moving back to Cardiff, but I put a lot of effort into that, and I think with friendships, I think you reap what you sow. And it's a bit the same for I guess, what some people call like your personal learning network, PLN. But I've got some amazing professional, I suppose, relationships that have become friendships. And if you look at like my Facebook, I've got a lot of people who I would have put in a work basket previously who are now friends. And, you know, they comment on pictures of my kids, and yeah. So I think that's probably, outside my kids and my marriage, I'd say that.
It's a really interesting one, that whole situation of, I won't say murking, but it's not murking, but that kind of, that crossover of, you know, when people go from like your work to your personal and vice versa, it's a strange thing.
Yeah, well, so I wrote a piece on LinkedIn a couple of years ago, and I called it something like the Barbie complex, because in my head, you know, like Barbie, you get ski Barbie and Malibu Barbie and horse riding Barbie, and that, you know, you kind of get, and there's lots of different facets to everybody's personality. But I find increasingly, and when I used to look at my social platforms, it would be Twitter was for work, like that's it. Obviously, LinkedIn is LinkedIn. Facebook was personal, and I wasn't on Instagram at the time because I don't think it existed. But now there's a definite bleeding across them all. And what I have found is, because I don't like to share pictures of the kids kind of publicly, I then am filtering. So on Twitter and Instagram, I don't post pictures of them, and I don't really talk about them that much, because I kind of want to respect their privacy. And, you know, let's face it, Twitter can be a bit weird. It's not necessarily somewhere that I feel comfortable posting pictures of them. So, you know, my Facebook is completely locked down. I will share, you know, we'll share pictures of them there, but and again, so I've naturally had to filter. That's a personal choice. So I've naturally had to filter and almost edit out what is obviously a massive part of my life. And it goes back to that Barbie thing of almost segmenting. You know, and I definitely think there's a bleed between things these days.
When I used to do facilitation, when I used to work at O2 in Tesco Mobile, so I used to design and deliver. So a lot of time I'd be delivering maybe an induction or something like that. And as with most inductions, you know, when you spend a couple of weeks with him or whatever, all of a sudden they're your best friend. And I remember once I kind of sat back and looked at how many friends I had. I was like, I pretty much got a whole call centre on me. And I'm like, these aren't even like my close friends. And I remember once I was looking at that, and on the side, you know, it tells you recommended friends or whatever. It's like, that's my auntie. So I haven't got my auntie connected on Facebook, but I've got this whole call centre.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it comes down to purpose, right? What do you want that network to give you, and what do you want that particular thing to achieve? And I think that this is a real thing that people forget about social networks and social platforms is, you know, it's a construct. It can be whatever you want it to be. So I always say about Twitter, my little area of Twitter, my little corner is great. It's rays of sunshine. It's brilliant people doing brilliant work. I have people who are passionate about things. I have people who are clever and smart and who challenge my thinking and share things. And it is a really positive place to be. But yet sometimes if you venture out of that and look at like discussions about politics, God forbid, or something like that, it's nuts. So my construct of Twitter and how I engage with it, I'm not saying this is right, but it's right for me. It gives me that positivity, and and that enables me to achieve what I want to achieve. But I always remember a friend after learning technologies one year saying, "What on earth have you been talking about on Twitter all week?" And I just said, "Well, I'm not talking to you. I'm there predominantly for work purposes, or certainly I was previously. You know, if you want to know about my personal life, like you're on my Facebook, look there."
Yeah.
And so I'm not, you're not my audience. So you can put up with that. Most of my friends don't follow me on there because I don't talk about anything that they want to hear about. And that's fine.
That's got to be so hard though to filter. Like, I mean, I don't use Twitter efficiently. It's probably the best way to do it. You know, you have these people who follow hashtags and have lists and whatever else. I literally go on, get triggered, respond, and then throw my phone in the corner.
Yeah, but it's organic and authentic, and I really believe that to be successful on any of these platforms, you have to be authentic. And you know, I used to be much more efficient, if you want to use that word, about scheduling posts and that kind of thing. It's just not something I do now. And I think there was probably a period a good few years ago where there was a definite FOMO element. You know, I think, oh my God, you know, what am I missing out on? And I think that the nature of it has evolved and changed over time for me.
I think it's that awareness for me, the awareness of knowing actually, and I think this is where, you know, your Apple, your iPhone, whatever else now tells you how much screen time you're spending and what you're spending it on, which really helps. But I remember I was in a conversation on Twitter, and it was with Nick Shackleton-Jones, Matt Ash, and was going on about, I think it was blockchain or something, I can't remember now. And I remember sitting down thinking, wow, I've just wasted my whole afternoon in this kind of, I don't think it was like
Is it a waste though?
Yeah, I think so. I think so on a Sunday. And the reason why I think that is because I think you're responding back and forth, and you're kind of interested in the conversation, but when you look out, you go, wow, I've just spent 4 hours on this. And you've got your dog who's looking at you with the big puppy eyes going, you know, what you're doing.
With a leopard print bow tie on, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, so what's your take on, and obviously I want to kind of talk about it from an L&D point of view then. So, you know, forget how you use Twitter for a second. What's your take on how L&D's awareness, L&D's kind of impact on Twitter, and how do you see what I'm trying to think how I can put this. What do you think the perception is of L&D on Twitter? Like, I can tell you what I think, but I'm really intrigued to tell you what you
do. You mean other people who are outside L&D or people within?
Well, no, people within, like how they use it, So
someone said to me this week that they find nowadays that it is there's too much posturing, and there's too much who can shout the loudest, actually, and that is a genuine, it's not like, asking for a friend. That is something that somebody said to me, and they are going to take it, they're personally taking a bit of a step back from things, which I thought was interesting. I've always feared that it could be a bit of an echo chamber, or can be a bit of an echo chamber, and people sort of patting themselves on the back, you know, for whatever. And it's everybody kind of, there's a clique of people that think the same. I personally feel that we're past that kind of peak, because I think there are other platforms are available. And I've seen the use of like LinkedIn change quite a lot in the last few years. I think people have other kind of platforms, and I think that kind of usage of it being you having to be present is not so strong. And I think Neil Lasher, I don't know if you know Neil, great. He's always got a good soundbite, Neil. He used to say, like, tweets are like heartbeats. You only get so many. And if you use them all up, you know, really early, like people who used to tweet all the time, you know, you just suddenly like sort of either stop using it or like will slowly kind of peter out. And I always remember that, because definitely my usage is not as high as it used to be. But there's still value there. And things like L&D Insight or HR Hour, you find some really good input into that, but you also have to remember that it's only a really small percentage of the profession that are represented on there. And it's like any social network or any of these networks, they always say 90% of people will just sit back and consume, you know, and it's probably only 1% who are really sort of actually creating anything. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, because it is a bubble. And I think the same is true if you look at the recent general election, you know, if you looked at any sort of Twitter or whatever, you'd probably have believed that Labour were going to win, which obviously didn't happen. So I think you have to always bear in mind that it is a bubble. It's not necessarily representative of the profession as a whole.
I have this theory that you could probably take a snapshot of LinkedIn L&D and go back 3 years, and within that week you can see the same discussion being talked about. I honestly believe it is that. It's
so my boss, David Wilson, he's had what was eLearnity and is now Fosway. It's 23 years old now, that company. We've for our 20th anniversary, which was not long after I joined, I did a bit of a retrospective. I went back into the archives and pulled out a load of papers and articles that he'd written kind of over the years. And it was terrifying how relevant some of them were. Social learning, he wrote something for social learning for TJ Training Journal in like 2001, and it could have been written yesterday. There's definitely some stuff in there around rapid e-learning and authoring, which is dated, right? There are things but pieces on blended. I definitely see those conversations still playing out. And doing judging, I do some judging on some of the awards, and some of the, when you're going through the shortlisting stage, there are still some really basic things, that are happening that are very like bit of e-learning, bit classroom, not very actually blended at all, really, probably quite segmented. And there are definitely some themes that never seem to go away.
I think it might have been Suck who kind of gave me this advice, and he was talking about you just have to be mindful of your usage. I think it was in a period where I was in between roles or something like that, and obviously a lot of the time you fill that space. You can only look for jobs for so long, it gets draining. So I remember I was in a period of just constantly scrolling Twitter and whatever else, and he's like, you just need to be mindful. Actually, he's very specific about when he goes on there. Like, okay, I'm going to give myself maybe an hour to look at whatever. And based on that, I kind of just decided, what I'm going to do? I'm just going to turn all notifications off. So just to stop that kind of nudge, that thing of, hey, look at me. So I think now on Twitter, half the time someone will send me a DM, and I'll pick it up like 3 or 4 days later. So there's the flip side to that of turning it, there's the reason why I need to be on.
Well, it's like Instagram. They're talking about Instagram turning off likes, aren't they? Or like being able to see how many. So I think you can see, but other people can't see how many people have liked your post. And it's interesting. I mean, my 6-year-old asked me for a TikTok account the other day. You and I have talked about TikTok. Yeah. And he watches YouTube, and he wants to start a YouTube channel for doing football tricks. And he's asking me, how did he get likes?
Wow.
And I'm like and I'm sort of having a conversation with him about not setting your self-worth by the number of likes you get, and he's just like glazing over. But he's 6,
where does that come from? So here's a great example. So you've watched Top Boy, right? The guy who's in Top Boy, yep. Ashley Walters, I think he's called. Anyway, commented on one of his posts yesterday. He responded back.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. First thing I did is took a screenshot of it. Yeah. That's it. I've made it.
I made it.
Yeah.
Mum, Dad.
And I'm like, what? I'm 36. But I just think, as a 6-year-old, where does that come from? Because it's got to come from, I'm assuming it's got to come from school, right? It's got to be...
I think it comes from, he's watching these videos of footballers doing tricks. That, and he also he plays like Super Mario, and he watches other gamers play to pick up tips, and he's learned how to play Minecraft essentially through watching some of these YouTube videos. Now, we're pretty strict on how much he watches, but even then, they all say at the end, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like. It's just it's just going to be part of his narrative as he grows up. You're not going to be able to, as it stands, he's not going to be able to get away from that. Yeah. And the channels will change. TikTok, whatever the next thing is. Facebook's for old people, isn't it, really? So whatever it might be, that will change over time, and by the time he's 16 it will be something else, obviously. But that kind of sharing and filming, and him, he's asking, he wants me to video him doing football tricks and share that, but actually to bring the conversation back to learning it. So it's a bit scary in some ways, the influence that that's had on him, but how much he has learnt. I don't know how to play Minecraft.
Oh.
I haven't got a clue. I'm not a gamer at all. It just does not float. It never has done. Never floated my boat. So when we sat down and booted up this Minecraft game, I don't have a clue what to do. It's like the blind leading the blind. But by watching other people play, he's learned what to do, and he can go off and build houses and castles and all of this great stuff that he loves doing, like with Lego. And now he's able to do that in Minecraft. He's really good at Mario Kart because he knows all the cheats, because he's watched all these other kids play it on YouTube. He's learning how to teach himself how to do football tricks. We go over the park with him and play football, but there's other, he's learning in different ways. It's not just about his dad showing him how to do this stuff now. So, I mean, thank God, probably, but but yeah, that's just going to be part of what they grow up with.
It's really interesting. You reminded me of a story. So Facebook, the biggest demographic going on Facebook is like 50 plus, and so it was my partner's granddad. It's on Facebook, but he just can't use it for the life of him. I remember I was on Facebook. I closed my Facebook down a while back. However, I got a notification and it was like, Derek is now live. I was like, what's going on here? So I went on and it's Derek sat down going, Gene, will you do us a brew? And he's obviously clicked the wrong button. Screwed it up the world.
That's brilliant. But you sent me that meme of a 40-year-old on TikTok, like looking around going, I was like, yeah, that's me, that was me, yeah, great.
It's so funny watching older people. I know we shouldn't laugh, but I can't help it because it's like my granddad, so it's fine.
That's going to be us, right? That's almost me with TikTok. It's tragic.
He's done it loads of times. Like one of his friends had died, and rather than comment on a post, he decided to put his comment as a status update to share it with all his mates in his group. It's just I feel like I could do a whole stand up around that.
But that's going to be us. What my 6-year-old and my 2-year-old are learning now. They're gonna laugh at us in 10 or 15 years. They're gonna be like, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, I like to think that I will stay up to date. At least I know what TikTok is. I was talking to some of the other parents at the school gates and said, oh, Thomas wants a TikTok account. They never even heard of it. So I thought, well, you're gonna have to get clued up, because your kids are gonna be miles ahead of you otherwise.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's, but that comes back to the people and the connections and the collecting. I think that it doesn't matter so much what the platform is. It's much more about making those connections. And one of the best pieces of advice I've ever had in my career was my colleague when I was at what is now Calidus, E2 Train then. And he said to me, never waste an opportunity to just go and meet somebody for a coffee.
Yeah.
And, I've got so many people, within my network now who I now count as friends who, speculative cup of coffee, or I've met on Twitter and then met in real life. James McCluckey, I always remember going, well, how will I know it's you? Because, you're going off a picture that's that big. And he was like, on 6'8", darling. I was like, all right. Okay, I'll be able to pick you out of a crowd then, it'll be fine. But, but transferring those, online relationships into real life, that makes a real difference. And then it almost doesn't matter what platform you're on, because you've built a solid foundation then. And I think that's probably what we're going to see. And something that you said in a previous podcast, I think it was the one with Gethin, he said something about, as things become more automated, actually we value the human connection that much more. And I think that's really true.
I just think the way I see it is, I think as long as you've got nephews, nieces, children, you know, you have to make that conscious effort to understand what their world looks like. And I think by doing that, you stay ahead of a trend. Like, I think it was TikTok, when I seen TikTok was happening, and I kind of put a post out around how Zappos are using it. And like I said, if the first person to start using this as part of an EVP and a talent attraction, especially when it comes to like apprenticeships. This is because when I was over in TalkTalk, I was doing it with Snapchat and Instagram, because they were the tools where the people were. And I think that is. But the reality of it is if they ever have a child and they start huffing and puffing about them showing me how to use tech, I'll just remind them that I once taught them how to use a spoon. And that'll be it. Job done.
I'm not sure I've successfully managed that with mine. Certainly not my 2-year-old.
So,
but you talk about fish where the fish live.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's really true.
So I think while we're talking about kind of youth of today, if I was to ask you to give a book as a gift, and it doesn't have to be you. Let's just be. We can put it with anybody actually. If you have to give a book as a gift to anybody, what book would you give as a gift?
Right, I knew you were going to ask me this, and weirdly, it's right here because I've just bought it for somebody, but I've given this to somebody before. So can I have two?
Yeah, go on then.
Because this is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Maxey.
Okay.
And I don't know if you follow him on Twitter or Instagram, but it's beautiful drawings, and it's just like little things to sort of help with kind of mental health and anxiety and all of the things that kind of are, you know, sort of modern day challenges, I suppose. So what is the bravest thing you've ever said? Asked the boy. Help, said the horse. And it's all sort of really, really beautiful pictures, and he shares them on Instagram, and the book is just like, the pictures are just absolutely gorgeous. So I've given this to a couple of people now just because I think it's really beautiful. And it's not, you wouldn't necessarily sit down and read it cover to cover, but it's lovely to be able to, it's like a coffee table book.
Yeah.
So that is one. And the other one would be The Guilty Feminist, I think, by Deborah Francis White. So she has a podcast of the same name, but the book delves into all sorts of historical, the historical sort of journey around feminism, but also things around, you know, transgender and like sort of gender fluid, gender neutral, all of these kind of new, in inverted commas, phrases and things that I think, you know, we're laughing about old people struggling with tech, but I think there are people out there who for sure are either just ignorant or ill-educated or not sure about all of this stuff. They might have the best intentions, but there's some really, really good stuff in there about all of that. And I think for men and women alike, or however you identify, it's a really, really good. I listened to it as an audiobook, so it's a really good listen.
Ah, okay. I'll check that out. I don't think I've come across that at all. So I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's a segue into women in learning for me.
Ah, there you go. Nicely done.
Smooth. But yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, there's Fosway and there's Learning Tech, which I want to cover. But obviously, for me, so let me tell you why women in learning is important for me. And I want to hear your story. So I remember I very first went to a conference, and I would say it was about 4 years ago, give or take. And I kind of put a statement out there, and it was very, very, it's quite simple, really. You've got a board of people a board of 50 plus people of age talking about millennials. Why don't you get some millennials on the board? And
hate the millennials thing.
And why is a board out of, I think there was 7, why is the board 6 for men? And I get it, I get the idea that the L&D industry is predominantly men and whatever else, or whatever you hear back from that kind of statement. And it was just more of a kind of just a call out. It wasn't me being disruptive or anything like that. It was just me saying what I seen at that event. Anyway, so fast forward, and I'm thinking about all the managers I've had, and honestly, all the managers that I've had, the best ones have always been women. So it's kind of just something what I'm aware of more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my take on women in learning from why I think it's important. But I want you to tell me why it is and what it is, because I only know very basic about this, Kate, so fill me in.
Have I not bored you enough with it? No, so this time last year, Don Taylor asked me to chair a session at Learning Technologies 2019, which was called Women in Learning. And we had 3 awesome women on the panel: Miriam Neelan, Nikki Verdi, who works at BP, and Lorna Matty, who works for Toyota Financial. And Don had put the panel together, but obviously wanted a woman to chair it. And Sharon Claffey-Calliope, who's based in the US, has previously chaired similar sessions on both sides of the Atlantic, and actually was originally invited to do so by Elliot Macy, who you may or may not have heard of, but it's very big in learning in the States and has a huge conference that is actually now part of the Learning Technologies family. And so I didn't really, had no sort of concept of what I was getting into, I suppose, with this session. But I had some calls with the ladies who were taking part, and I had a call, amazing couple of conversations with Sharon beforehand. And I wanted to frame the conversation a little bit. And Don Taylor had done some research a year before, which I'd seen, and not really, to my sort of shame, really, I hadn't really absorbed the magnitude of it, if that makes sense. So he'd done some research across the Learning and Skills Group, which is a huge online community now, thousands and thousands of L&D professionals worldwide. And essentially what it shows is that in junior roles, you've got about 3/4 of them are women. Middle managers are around 50-50 across men and women. And when you get to senior roles, around 3/4 of them are men. So women are not getting to the top, basically. And I put out, Don had done this infographic the year previously, and I wanted to give the session some publicity, as is my want. We're talking about, spent a lot of time talking about social media and all of that. And obviously I look after the back channel for Learning Technology. So I wanted to kind of, pimp it a bit, I suppose, and make it aware, make people aware that we were talking about it. And the engagement I got on that one post was just bigger than anything I've ever put out, ever, on any channel. Even things combined, I haven't had that kind of level of engagement on. It just went nuts. Oh, apart from the one time I asked about WordPress developers, and I got about 40,000 inbox. Don't ever put the word WordPress into a LinkedIn post, basically. But anyway, I digress. And I just knew that it was potentially a really hot topic for people. And I've always been a feminist. I've always been enabled by both men and women. I've never really come across any real massive sexism in my career, but it's something I feel very strongly about, despite having not been on the negative end of anything. And then, the session went really well, and we had, I think, 3 men attend, and the rest were women. But we had some really good sort of stuff come out of it. And then, since then, I, sort of after it, I wanted to not let the fire die, I suppose. And I think that a lot of the time at any conference, people go back to their desks and then it's just business as usual, right? And, and we talk about, the forgetting curve, and we talk about, all behavior change and all of the things we talk about in L&D. And I didn't want that to happen to this subject. So I set up a LinkedIn group and just wanted to keep the conversation going, really. And that's just kind of surpassed any kind of expectations I could have had. I think there's about 900 people in it now. I specifically wanted it to feel inclusive. So, it's men, women, dogs, whatever, any creed or colour. And I think that is really what the crux of it comes down to for me, is that actually, yes, the kind of the conversation and the movement and all of this has been triggered by kind of women and a gender imbalance. But actually, if you look across the industry as well, we're not really that diverse. Um, and it's really important to have, I mean, it's a bit cheesy to say role models, but, it's important for people coming into the industry to see people like them, to believe that they can get to the top and they can achieve things and they can do things. And it isn't just about the in-house side of things and the practitioner side of things, it's about the vendor side of things as well. And actually, where are the women founders of startups? There are a few that really stand out. Juliet Denny at Growth Engineering. You've got Cheryl Clemens at Storytagger, but there are still predominantly more male founders. And that's not to say that we need less male founders. We just need more female ones. But it all comes back. I've digressed a little bit, but it all comes back to that thing around inclusion. And at one of the panels we ran, LPI invited us to do a Women in Learning session at Learning Live. And one of the ladies we had on the panel works at one of the big accounting firms. And you'd think that would be really white and really male. And actually, she's from an all-female team, quite diverse in appearances, etc. But actually, she said where they lack diversity is they're all university educated, they're all sort of middle class kind of backgrounds, and they've all worked in these kind of very corporate organizations, and what they lack is diversity of thought. And that was one of those kind of moments where that kind of blew my mind. And if you look at the stats from like the World Economic Forum, they will say there is a moral imperative to improve gender balance and balance across ethnicity, ability, socioeconomic background, etc. So we have a moral duty to do that. But actually, in the longer term, there will be a financial incentive as well, because again, we talk about the world changing around our kids. In the future, it's only getting harder to recruit the best people. If you look like you are just a bunch of middle-aged white guys, and I'm not picking on middle-aged white guys, but if you look like your organization is not diverse or open or inclusive, people aren't going to go and work there, or they're not going to buy your products. And it's like being sort of environmentally responsible now, people swerving plastic packaging and making decisions based on shipping and where people are based and shop local and things like that. People are going to make those decisions about where they work and who they buy from based on this kind of stuff. So it's just so important that we become more inclusive. And I think sometimes you look at the political situation at the moment, although I try not to, and it's a bit scary because you think we almost going backwards. But that just adds fuel to the fire. So what I'm hoping for 2020 is I've got some really awesome women on board. So Ashley Sinclair, who is only in her early 30s, she's just set up her own marketing business. People like Laurie Niles Huffman that you've had on the podcast before, people like Jane Daly over at Towards Maturity. I've got some really amazing women, giving up their time to take part in all of this, because this isn't just about me spearheading something. If it's going to really make a difference, ultimately, it has to be very, again, inclusive effort. So there's things like we're looking at a mentoring scheme podcast.
Okay.
And, kind of various other activities to try and, further this whole agenda, really. So watch this space, because again, comes back to that, what we talked about, juggling too many things. Passion is a passion project. I'm busy. And again, this is why, more people are getting involved now, because it spreads that load and helps things move a lot quicker.
So I guess I just want to dig into it a little bit more. But I guess two things that really jump out to me. So why is that? Why is that a thing? Do you think that's due to posturing by men shouting louder, so to speak? Because here's a great example. So my podcast, I always try and get 50-50 split. Always.
Mm-hmm.
Never get it. And the reason I struggle, it could be down to the people, the women in our industry. You know, because this sounds really bad, and I'm not sure how to phrase this, but I'll just say not many people want to come onto a podcast. Is there a fear aspect? Is there an aspect of whether like, oh, I don't know, I might take, this is. I try to ask myself, why is it either A, it's hard to get hold of people, of women to come onto the show, versus men, obviously, bigger pond, more fish, and actually, what can I do to get more females onto the show?
And you're not alone in that. I mean, Learning Now TV, Colin Steed tries again really hard to balance that out across the genders, and I know conference organisers also find it really difficult. Most of the unsolicited kind of pitches for speaking will be from men, not women. So I think there is something, there's been a lot of talk about imposter syndrome. There's a lot of talk about, the kind of the difference between, the men and women will put themselves forward or not. Like maybe women like to be asked more than putting themselves forward for things. I mean, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. But I like to think that it's not all due to that. However, some of it must be. In terms of not getting to the top, there is a trend. We did a bit of research last summer. There is a trend around women jumping off of corporate roles to, freelance, consult, that kind of thing, because it's more flexible around families. Obviously, I've been in that position myself. So there is something maybe there in that trend as well, that when you look at the figures from the Learning and Skills Group, it is specifically looking at in-house roles. And also, to get a bit more existential about it, I suppose, what does success look like? Is it about being, a CHRO or, a head of learning or whatever it might be? Is that success, or is success having your own business and balancing your family life, etc., etc.? So I think we have to be careful about what the goals are for women in learning, because yes, it would be great to see more women getting into senior roles, but that is not necessarily the be all and end all.
It's kind of got me thinking about, I was talking to a friend, and he kind of highlighted something which he's seen at a couple of learning conferences, and he said it's really interesting. The top level speakers are predominantly men, but if you go into the exhibit, it's predominantly women. He's like, why do you think that is? He asked me that question straight out. He went, why do you think when you look at the stalls, it's, there's a lot more awareness, presence of women on the stalls, yet the conferences, there's a lot more men. And it stumped me. It stumped me, instantly my mind went to, well, we all know why that is. They're trying to grab attention. And then I was like, actually, I don't know. Is there more to it than that? I'm not really sure.
I went to a HR conference a few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and they had like the Formula One girls, like walking around with sashes and giving out leaflets and all of that kind of thing. And it's like, that's a HR conference. And I definitely think the world has changed. We're post Me Too, post Weinstein, all of that stuff. And even I was watching an old episode of Friends the other day just because I happened to be on, and even a couple of comments in that was like, you wouldn't write that script now.
Yeah.
And the world has changed, and you don't get that kind of thing at learning conferences. But it is definitely, I mean, my boss is called David. He spoke at an event not last summer before, and it was kind of arranged through a third party. It wasn't us that sorted it all out. But there were more white guys called David on the agenda than there were women out of a day's worth of speakers. There was one woman, one other guy, and then 3 guys called David. And like at a HR conference.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think this is the thing. I think you just need to start opening your eyes and looking around. And, I mean, Andrew Jacobs has this sort of hashtag that he uses. It starts with me, and is pushing back on some of the speaking invitations that he gets to say, well, what's your gender split on the speakers, or could I point you in the direction of a female colleague of mine who might be able to take my place, which is really great, and shows just sort of giving these conference organisers a bit of a kick to say, and it's not about kicking them, but just be aware and have that awareness of that mix of gender and ethnicity and whatever else it is. And ultimately, hopefully, you are then putting together a more interesting, more diverse of thought, challenging speaker lineup.
I guess it's an interesting one. What Andrew's doing is great, but I guess my instant question is, well, potentially then it's only as good as your network. Like if he turns around and says, it's only as good as your network. It's kind of going back to what you were saying right at the beginning. The value what you put into them connections and the value what you put into them friendships. Because the reality of it is if Andrew only invests his time in, say, 20, his mates, his lad mates, the bias will be to direct them to a mate. So then is the question, actually, we just need more split networking opportunities? And because for me, if I think about it, I'm quite equally split, I would say. 50. I'd probably say it's about 50-50, give or take. I could point to numerous women, I could point to numerous guys. But looking at my mates, predominantly it's lads. And I know it's a different kind of setting, but the reality of it is especially when we talk about what we said at the beginning about actually your workmates, the people who you network with become your friends. I think is it not a bigger question to say actually what we need more opportunities for guys to, one, be aware of the females in our industry who are absolutely amazing at what we do.
Yeah. And
I guess, but one, it's great having one person doing that, I guess, but we need 50, 100 people doing it.
Absolutely. And I do think, I do think it starts with just that awareness. Like I said at the start, I've always been, I grew up as a tomboy. I've always had, lad mates, and I still do. And, that's not, that obviously when I was 3 years old, that was not a conscious decision. That was just, the way it happened. And who I guess my parents' friends, what their kids were.
Yeah.
And your interests are your interests. But I think you mentioned school, and that's been a real eye opener for me. My son suddenly coming home talking about boys' toys and girls' toys. That's not language that we use in this house, and that's school. That's our external influences, and that's really hard to fight that. And that's what you do have to fight it. Walk into any toy shop, you've got an aisle of pink, and then you've got an aisle of blue. Effectively, it's awful actually when you sort of start to look at it quite closely. Although I do think some of that is changing. Like I think a lot of websites now you can't necessarily search on girls or boys toys. They're becoming more kind of gender neutral around all of that. But yeah, I think I got some backlash around the inclusion of men, and it's not I just without men being part of the conversation, I just don't think you get anywhere. And it was a really conscious decision to make it open, because all right, you look at the split of people within the Women in Learning group. Obviously it's more women, but I do think without the support of men, you're not, and without the buy-in of men, you're not going to win. You're not going to change any hearts and minds, and that's ultimately sort of what you're trying to do. And you talk about some of your best bosses have been women. Some of the biggest enablers in my career have been men.
Yeah.
So it's not about being shut out. And actually, I did a podcast once, and they talked about, I can't remember. It was a glass slipper rather than a glass ceiling or something like that, and it was around women not empowering other women.
Okay.
And Margaret Thatcher's always used as a bit of an example. Like, she was Prime Minister, but she didn't have any other females in her cabinet, because it was almost like, well, there's room for me, and there's not room for any other women here. So that is very much what I hope, that if this ever builds out any kind of legacy or any kind of message, is that it is about being inclusive. Yeah. And I really sort of take on board what you said as well about different voices. The back channel that I do for Learning Technologies, again, I really make an effort to try and mix that up and bring in different voices, so it's not the same. I don't want it to feel cliquey. I don't want it to feel like it's the same faces doing the same thing every year. I really try and almost like talent scout and try and who's new, like who's posting stuff that's a bit different, and try and have your eyes out, because ultimately these people are sharing insights from that event, and you want diversity of thought and diversity of opinion around all that, and you want different takes and different backgrounds to contribute to that. So, and I think, I would say this, but I think we do that quite well.
Yeah.
And I think that shows in the level of engagement that we get. So I think it's about, being able to extrapolate that further, and, going right back to the beginning where I said I'm a collector of people. I think part of the motivation for me saying that as well is, it's not like I don't want to ever sit there and go, right, I'm done. Got my network. I'm sitting pretty. It's all good. I don't want that for me and my connections, because I like to meet new people, but I'm also a big believer in paying it forward.
It's an interesting one, I guess. For me, the way I kind of see women learning is exactly what you said. It's about inclusivity, not exclusivity. The awareness is the focus, like the awareness of women in learning. That doesn't necessarily mean guys can't talk, and I think that's it's not either or. Yeah, and I think I witnessed on Twitter something. I think I witnessed that go down, and I thought that was really well handled by you, because the reality of it is if it is a women's only kind of thing, and it becomes that thing for women only, instantly you start to be exclusive and you start to single yourself out passively. That's just what would happen. So yeah, no, I thought that was handled really well, and I think when I seen it happen on Twitter a while back anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I got some really good advice from Deborah Francis White, actually. I messaged her, and she was amazing. I mean, I've met her at Learning Technologies before, and she was incredible, because obviously doing what she has done around the Guilty Feminist, she has had lots of stick for lots of different elements of that. And she said every time she's had a male guest on the podcast, pretty much without exception, she's had some backlash around that. This is a feminist thing, it's supposed to be about women's voices, and blah, 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 blah. And actually the Women in Learning panel we did on Learning Now TV, I invited Andrew onto that on purpose, because it isn't about, like, going back to that, being inclusive thing. And she just said, it's very easy for others to throw stones while you're trying to do something, and there is nothing to stop anybody doing any of this stuff. And what we're trying to get to is sort of we're building out a kind of almost like a starter pack at the moment. So if people want to do, like you do your Mind Chimp meetups, there's nothing to stop anyone doing women in learning meetups or events or anything like that. It absolutely isn't about coming through me or Sharon or any of some of the people who've been quite active. Anybody can. I want people to feel that anybody could get involved and do stuff. So I'm just working on the website at the moment, and we're working on like a bit of a pack. And the way that I liken it is, I did a Macmillan Cancer coffee morning about 3-4 months ago, and all I did was I signed up and they sent me a pack. I would say I made some cakes. That'd be a lie. I bought some cakes, and then people brought cakes with them, and everybody chucked some money in the pot, and it was a really nice day. And then I sent the money off, and no, they didn't need to police me or anything. They gave me the tools I needed to be able to do that, and that is what we're trying to get to now with Women in Learning, is to almost say, well, here's the starter pack. If you want to crack on, you want to do something in your organisation, if you want to do something, people have talked about doing some meetups in Scotland or Northern Ireland, amazing. It doesn't have to be London centric, doesn't have to be Cape centric, and I really hope that is something that we can get to in 2020.
Okay, so kind of taking this a different angle now then. So obviously you've got Women in Learning, and then you've got Fosway as well, which I want to touch on in just a second. However, let's pretend you've got a billboard and you've got 1 million people coming out of the stadium.
I hate this question. I don't know what I'm going to say to this. I know what this question is.
And you get to shape 1 million people's minds, or give them a nudge, give them something to change context and make them think about something. What would you put on that billboard?
It's a really good question. And I think I'd say, look around you. Okay. And if everybody around you looks like you, then you possibly need to start broadening your horizons. Okay,
I like it. Sound advice, actually. That's so sound advice. Isn't true.
I'm all about the wisdom. But yeah, I think I just wrote something for Women in Learning the other day, and and I don't want to come off as preachy because I'm not perfect, and I sit here with my straight white female privilege. I'm not ignorant of that. I'm in I'm from not a massively wealthy family, but middle class family. Had a great education. I'm not ignorant of my position of privilege at all. And I think that I hope that my awareness of my own privilege it is something that helps me to potentially open doors for other people. And as I say, I've worked for some very generous and open colleagues that open doors for me, and I've always tried to do that for other people. And I think now I'm getting a bit older, that is something I'm very conscious of, and I've always tried to do that. And I think the Women in Learning thing's probably just an extension of that, really. And I think that it's just, as I say, it's post Me Too and all of that. It's just the time is right.
Yeah, I agree. I think the time is right, and it's needed. It's needed, and it's been a long time coming. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what comes from Women in Learning.
Well, thanks.
Really.
And I think support from our male counterparts is really key to getting anywhere. And I think that if there are any kind of real stuck in the mud sexist pig males out there, then they're not going to listen to a woman anyway. They're gonna much more take on board that message coming from a man, really. So I do think that we need the advocates, in the men in the industry, and there are still a lot of men in a lot of positions of power, running conferences and running institutes and or running big organizations, we're not gonna change things without taking you guys with us.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Along for the ride.
Yes, for sure. So I've got 3 questions. Well, I've got 4, but and then we're done. So obviously, your role takes you to various different conferences and kind of, you do tweeting and you have your opinions, which are all valid and stuff. But one of the real big things which I like about you is you're not scared of just jumping in front of a camera and capturing your videos, your thoughts, your whatever. So one of the things which I think people fear isn't being recorded. It's actually that initial stage of getting in front of a camera and just doing it. So what 3 pieces of advice would you give to someone who's wanting to jump in front of a camera and share knowledge and share 30-second videos or a couple of minute videos, but we haven't done it yet? What 3 pieces of advice would you give to someone?
That's a good question. I think the first one is get over yourself.
Okay.
It sounds a bit savage, but guy called Sam Burrows gave me some great advice when I thought about starting my blog many years ago, which is woefully neglected at the moment. But he just said, write for yourself, and if anybody reads it, it's a bonus. And my use of Twitter and writing and subsequently the videos is almost a way of taking notes, reflection, and getting that down. And I would never sit there and watch my own video back or read my own blog back, but just the very process of when I live tweet or go do those live updates, it's a way for me now of note taking, and it helps me process, especially when we only had 140 characters. But the art of sort of getting in front of the camera and trying to do something in 3 minutes, because you've probably only got 2 or 3 minutes before people tune out. It forces you to have that reflection and think, well, what was my key takeaway? Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe it was crap. That's okay. I mean, I wouldn't go out and slag somebody off because it's not my style. I don't think it's very constructive. And if there's not a key takeaway from a session, then I probably won't do a video on it. But if I've been to something good, or if I've seen something thought-provoking, or even if I've just seen something middle of the road, it's almost like mining for gold. Like, where's the nugget? What's the one thing that I could take away from that? So it forces you to reflect and look for the good, I think. So think of it. So get over yourself. Take it as an opportunity to reflect and gather your thoughts. And have the courage of your convictions, because I disagree with you. I think it isn't about people being scared to be on video. I think it's about people being scared of their opinions being rubbished.
Okay. Yeah.
Personally, I think that's a bigger thing. I mean, some people maybe have a bit of camera fright, but I think it's more about not having the courage of their convictions. So if you are, confident in what you think, and it's just my take, my take is my take. It's not anybody else's take. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. Somebody else could attend exactly the same session and take away. I mean, there's a guy who spoke at LT a few years ago, Jaron Lanier, and he's one of the most divisive speakers I've seen at LT, and people came out with such different opinions and such different takeaways from that talk. So neither of them are necessarily right or wrong.
Yeah.
It was a great, it was an interesting, thought-provoking session. But whatever your conviction is, have the courage of that. And I think by committing that to video, you're possibly wedding yourself to that in a way that some people don't want to be wedded.
I think that's a good shout, actually. I think, I get that. I think it's really interesting. Someone once gave me a bit of advice, and he summed it up. He said there's 3 types of people who look at your stuff. The people who really hate you, and don't like you and think your stuff is a load of crap. The people who think your stuff is brilliant, it's different, it's fresh. And then there's the people who really just take you or leave you. And he said, all you've got to do is just write for them people who like you. The rest don't really matter.
Well, do you know a guy called Seth Godin? Have you heard of him?
Yeah, heard of Seth.
So he talks about 1,000 true fans.
Yep.
Gain 1,000 true fans. And he talks about, you know, it is a privilege to create content and write and share things with your core audience, and the rest don't matter. You know, if you're writing stuff that they like, then, and you know, sometimes those ideas spread, and he's written multiple books about that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And then your mum will always watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I just needed to watch it through 1,000 devices, that's all.
But yeah, no, I really agree with that.
So I guess kind of coming back to a point to kind of you in the moment now. So obviously you work at Fosway and in fact, let's do it this way. Tell me what a day in your life looks like at Fosway.
It's busy. So, I mean, I work from home, and my best friend's husband said to me a couple of years ago, do you not ever get bored working from home? I'm like, chance to be a fine thing. I work 4 days a week, so it's full pelt. We are always busy. So Fosway has 2 practices, so a HR practice and a learning practice, and there are peaks and troughs of those at different times. So at the moment, we're in a massive learning peak. We've got the new 9 grids for learning systems, digital learning coming out at the end of January. I don't know when you're going to publish this, but and obviously prep for learning technologies. We're doing learning technologies France this year as well, and they're back to back, so that's magnificent timing. And then, so at the moment, I wear a hat that covers all of the marketing stuff. So everything from, you know, kind of the comms around the new 9 grid launches, and working with you know, industry publications, articles, you know, all of that kind of stuff, prepping for the shows. And then I have a content hat, which has sort of historically been the bigger part of my role really at Fosway, because obviously we have all of this research content, and so everything that goes out the door passes by me pretty much. So whether or not that's a piece of kind of custom research that we'll be doing, or we do our annual HR realities and the digital learning realities, which is open at the moment. Go to fosway.com if you want to take part, if you're listening to this. And all of that stuff will pass by me. So the analysts do the kind of the number crunching, will pull out the key trends, I suppose, and the interesting elements of the data. And then again, it comes back to what I said at the beginning about stories. You know, all of the thing I love about data, and I'm not really like a numbers person, but I love the narrative. What does that tell us? And what I like about Fosway, the 2 things I like about Fosway so much is that one is that, you know, as much as we're looking at, you know, forward about innovation, future of work and things, everything that we do is grounded in like the practical. And actually, if you're Jill, the L&D manager, you know, I have this fictional character in my head always. She's always been with me all the way through my career. But, you know, if I'm Jill, the L&D manager, I'm in a kind of organization of 2,000 people, I haven't got a massive budget. You know, how does any of this affect me? How can I leverage any of this stuff, and how can I make use of some of this stuff? So, you know, it's that kind of pragmatic advice that we give. And then around the data, again, it's that narrative. So it's not just about data for data's sake. Like 87% of learning and development professionals think X. So what? So it's the so fucking what is, you know, that's what we sit there and say, well, so what? Like, what does that mean? And that's, you know, that I really love that. I really love sort of understanding the narrative, and I work with such clever people. You know, they're so and they've all been practitioners in their time. So, they've lived and breathed this stuff, this learning technology stuff from a user point of view as well. And it's so varied. I get to do loads of different stuff, and I learn a lot from what I do and the people that I work with, and sort of getting involved in some of the research stuff. I'm getting to do qualitative conversations with heads of learning, find out what they're doing, again, listen to their stories. We do these round tables where, you'd love to be a fly on the wall at some of our round table events. They're all, Chatham House rules, but the stuff people share is just so honest, and people come because they sort of say, oh, it's a bit like therapy, it's like it's like I can share my problems, but also hear that other people are having similar challenges in their organization. So it's just fantastic. It's never boring. And I really believe that there is so much we have to offer, and that anybody working in-house in any of these sorts of HR or talent or learning roles could benefit from our insight.
Yeah.
And I think to have that belief in what you're doing makes a massive difference to, your day-to-day motivation.
Yeah, I think so. I think the very first time I came across Fosway was the 9-box grid.
Yeah, the 9 grid. Yeah.
Yeah, 9 grid. Sorry, and maybe share a little bit about where that came from, and kind of, because every year I know a lot of L&D folk look forward to that and whatever else. So yeah, maybe share.
I think it's kind of like a physical manifestation, I suppose, of the insight in the data that we've got. So behind every 9 grid, there's thousands and thousands of lines of data. So the vendors themselves fill out a hideous sort of a sort of like a self-assessment. We also speak to their customers in a survey format and kind of qualitative feedback conversations. We also obviously pay attention to what's going on in the market. And so, you very quickly hear about trends of maybe people are jumping ship from a certain supplier, or, a new supplier is coming in and really disrupting the market, whatever it might be. So there's a huge amount of data, both qualitative and quantitative, that go into each 9 grid. But David wanted a model that HR folk would relate to. And obviously you have the 9-box grid in the talent side of things. So it was very deliberate that he took that approach. He didn't want to just recreate a kind of another quadrant. And it's typical of sort of something that we would do, that there is nuance to it. So you've got the potential and the performance axes. You've also got total cost of ownership. You don't get a lot of people talking about cost, and certainly not total cost of ownership, because it isn't just about the license cost. Back when people used to sort of implement Moodle more, fine. Oh, it's free. Well, it's not free though, is it? Because actually you've got to pay somebody probably to set it all up for you. Whereas, there is a cost, right? There's always a cost. Because that's a very basic example of thinking about total cost of ownership. And you've got presence, which, so the size of the blob effectively on the grid will show you how much presence a certain vendor has in the market, and their trajectory. So are they trending upwards? And I think the key thing about it for me is that it gives people who are buying this stuff, you walk into learning technologies any year, and I pick on learning technologies, it's not fair. It's not a negative against learning technologies. It's just because they're the biggest. But how on earth does Jill, the L&D manager, start to sift through all of that noise? Well, everybody says they do everything. Everybody's an experience platform or a whatever. There's always a different buzzword every year or two. It's really bloody difficult, to start to sift through that stuff and start to understand, actually, in your context and for your unique requirements, what do you need? And the thing that I really like about the 9 grid is it starts to give people a steer. And it isn't just about the top right. So it isn't just about who's in a strategic leader sort of zone, because actually somebody who's, sort of down here, potential performer, if you're an SME and you haven't got a massive budget, you probably don't need all those million bells and whistles on this strategic leader provider up here. So pick someone that suits you in your context. And there's value. We always say there's value in every zone. So obviously all the vendors want to be, higher up, but actually there is huge value in picking a vendor that suits, your size, your budget, etc. So I mean, I always remember when I worked for E2Train and somebody went off and picked, we were down to like the last two, whatever, in a deal, and it was a housing association, and a little housing association for like Gloucestershire or something, and they went off and picked a massive American suite provider. Why did they? That's just not a good decision for them, because it's probably loads of stuff they didn't need, probably massive budget, probably not local support or not UK support at the time. Bad decision. I mean, I don't know how it turned out, but at the time I remember thinking it was a bad decision. So if we can help, Fosway can help people make better buying decisions, that's ultimately the goal there.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good. I think from a I've only got 5 minutes to quickly look at something. It's really good for that. It's kind of right. Okay, visually, it's simple, right? Like that's the beauty of it. When you look at it, you can dig into it deeper. But actually, if you want to quickly filter out and go, actually, this group of people probably not for me right now. This is okay. Now I can shrink in who I need to go and kind of scope out and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting that there's some changes coming this year, and it's good. It's good to reflect the way that the market's changing.
Cool.
I mean, I would say that, right? I'm biased, but I know that I would use them, and I would use our research even if I didn't work for Fosway, hand on heart.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I guess kind of coming full circle now, and so right at the start of the session, I asked you what do you want to be when you grow up, and you said kind of a digger driver, and I think there was a footballer in there, and then I think we fell on journalist.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously we never really stopped growing up, Kate, and it's a journey, right? So if I was to ask that question now, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you say?
I still ask myself that all the time. So, I still don't know. And I think that I suppose my career has not been a plan, and it hasn't been particularly linear. And actually I did a session years ago for some youngsters, dare I say, and I had this had an image of a treadmill, and I said, like, don't be afraid to jump off the treadmill. I mean, when I went to university, I did a very business driven course, and it was all about going and getting a grad job with a FTSE 100 company, and success was a corner office, and blah blah, all of those sort of really 90s type of things. And I just think the world has changed. I mean, I started up a business with, a Dropbox account, a quick email to company's house, and a £7 a month hosting contract for a WordPress site. It doesn't take much these days to be able to do that. And like I say, I think success comes in many forms, and I think balance is important for me these days, having been through a period of not much balance. So the answer is I don't know, but I would. I still really like this industry, and I think that there is a lot more to do here, and the kind of the phrase around the war for talent and all that kind of stuff, it's really overused. But I heard an advert on the radio in the car today for around apprenticeships for Wales, and helping people build better businesses and helping people become employers of choice. all of that stuff. I love to help people with their CVs and bits and pieces. I'd love to do something on the side around something like Prince's Trust or something like that when the kids are a bit bigger and I've got, she says optimistically, got a bit more time. But I still think there's a lot to do in helping organisations become better at hiring, developing, retaining people. And I like working in that space. I think it's full of very passionate people who are passionate about people, if that's not too many P's. And I enjoy it. So what that role exactly looks like, I don't know. And I suppose I have this funny thing where I work for an analyst, but I'm not an analyst. So what am I?
Yeah.
And actually, I don't think that definition sort of matters too much. So I try not to navel gaze too much. I try to just get on. Things come along like Women in Learning that I'm passionate about, I'm interested in. I'm still very passionate about what we do at Fosway. So I'm just quite happy to see what comes next, really.
Okay, cool. So right at the start, I asked you for some numbers. These numbers.
Here we go.
Yes, these numbers tally to some random items. So
what if I let myself in for here?
You probably know the drill right now, but on Desert Island, and these are the 5 items what you've managed to find.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'm rubbish at these things.
The first one is an ice cube. That was number 7. 23 was a picture frame. 42 was a boom box. Number 61 was a clay pot. And number 95 was a pool stick. So, what are we doing with these items, Kate?
We're having a party, aren't we? Boom box, an ice cube, and some sort of drinking vessel. Don't know what the pool cue's doing. Maybe I'll make some sort of shade. I'll get some like nice big banana leaf or something and attach it to that.
Okay.
Picture frame. I don't know what the picture frame's doing. But yeah, the clay pot and the ice cube and the boom box. Like that's all you need for a party right there.
Yeah, sounds like it. Maybe you could draw the picture up, like you see in these Instagram things now where it's a frame.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I haven't got a phone.
It's a good point. Okay, good shout. That was very quick, actually. I like that.
I'm not usually good at those things.
That was fast. That was very fast. So, Kate, where can people find out a little bit more about you?
I am everywhere at Kate Graham 23. People can check out more about Fosway via @Fosway and more about Women in Learning. If you search on LinkedIn #Women in Learning, there's a group. You do have to ask to join. The way that LinkedIn sets up groups is a bit crap. So that wasn't I don't think I had a huge amount of choice in that, but I always approve those really, really quickly. And I'd love for any input, suggestions, volunteering, anything around Women in Learning. Like I say, we're looking at setting up the mentoring scheme. If anyone's interested in being a mentee or a mentor, then definitely get in touch.
Cool. Well, last question. Is there anything what I've not asked you what you would like to tell?
You've asked me quite a lot. No, I don't think so. I think where I've been, where I am, where I'm going. That's it, right?
Cool. That sounds good to me. It's been an absolute pleasure, Kate. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Enjoy the rest of the evening, Kate. Bye-bye.